250,000 years had passed since Earth fell silent. The Velcrin Imperium had grown beyond anyone's wildest dreams. They controlled 100,000 worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their fleets numbered in the millions. Their population reached into the trillions. Overlord Thren, the conqueror of Earth, had become something far greater. He was now the Grand Architect, one of the 5 rulers of the Imperium. Age meant nothing to him anymore. His organic body had failed after 20,000 years, but Velcrin science had advanced. They transferred his consciousness into a mechanical form, a body of living metal that would never decay. Thren stood in his palace on the capital world, looking at a holographic map of his empire. Each light represented a conquered world. Each light was a testament to Velcrin superiority. Among them, almost invisible in the vast display, was a small yellow star. Earth. My first conquest, he said to himself. The world that began everything. Earth had become a museum. The Velcrins built massive monuments there, towering structures that told the story of their victory. Young Velcrins took pilgrimages to see the place where the Imperium truly began. They walked among the mindless humans, studying them like ancient artifacts. Kes was one of these pilgrims, but she was different from most. She was a scholar interested in the species the Velcrins had silenced. Most of her people saw the conquered as nothing more than animals, but Kes wondered what they had been before. She studied Earth with careful attention, reading every fragment of human history the Velcrins had preserved. She noticed something strange during her third visit to Earth. The planet's magnetic field had an unusual pattern. It wasn't natural. It pulsed in ways that seemed almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried deep in the planet's core. Do you see this? She asked her research assistant, showing him the data. He barely glanced at it. Magnetic fields shift. It's normal geology? But Kes wasn't satisfied. She spent months analyzing the patterns. She found similar rhythms in the planet's tectonic movements. Even the migration patterns of the remaining humans showed traces of it. Something was organizing these movements. Something was calculating. She brought her findings to her superior, a high-ranking scholar named Vex. He listened politely, then dismissed her concerns. The silence engine was perfect, Kes. The humans are gone. What you're seeing is just natural planetary processes. You're looking for patterns that don't exist. Kes wanted to argue, but Vex had already moved on to other matters. She left his office frustrated. No one would listen to her. They all believed the silence engine had done its job perfectly, but she couldn't let it go. She found an ally in an unexpected place. Dorn was a maintenance engineer who worked on Earth's silence engine. The massive device still stood where the Velcrins had left it, kept running at low power to ensure the humans never regained their intelligence. Dorn had been maintaining it for 30 years, and he took pride in his work. When Kes approached him with her theories, he was skeptical at first. The engine works perfectly, he said. I check it every day. Then why is it drawing more power than it did 100 years ago? Kes showed him her data. Look at these readings. The power consumption has been increasing. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but it's there. Dorn studied the numbers with growing concern. She was right. The engine was working harder than it should. Something was draining energy from it. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. Together, they investigated. Dorn gave Kes access to maintenance records going back thousands of years. The pattern was clear once they looked for it. Every century, the silence engine consumed slightly more energy. The increase was so small that individual engineers never noticed it. But over millennia, it added up to something significant. What could cause this? Kes asked. Dorn had a terrifying thought. What if something is fighting it? What if the humans never fully succumbed? They took their findings to Overlord Thren himself. Getting an audience with the Grand Architect was nearly impossible, but Kes used every favor and connection she had. Finally, they stood before him in his towering mechanical form, presenting their evidence. Thren listened in silence. When they finished, he laughed. It was a cold, mechanical sound that echoed through the chamber. You waste my time with this? The silence engine has worked perfectly for 250,000 years. The humans are animals. This data shows nothing but minor fluctuations. But Grand Architect, Kess protested. The patterns suggest you're seeing ghosts, Thren interrupted. I was there when we silenced Earth. I watched every human lose their mind. They're gone, scholar. Accept it and move on. He dismissed them without another word. Kess and Dorn left the palace in defeat. As they walked through the streets of the capital, Dorn said quietly, "He's wrong." "I know he is. Something is happening on Earth. But what can we do?" Kess asked. "No one will listen to us. Thren has decided the matter is closed." Dorn thought for a moment. "We continue investigating. In secret if we must. If something is really happening on Earth, we need to know what it is before it's too late." So they became secret researchers, meeting in private to share data and theories. Kess studied the historical records of Earth, learning everything she could about human civilization before the silence. Dorn monitored the silence engine obsessively, documenting every anomaly. Years passed. The Velcrin Imperium continued to expand, but cracks were beginning to show. Managing 100,000 worlds was difficult. Resources were stretched thin. Internal conflicts arose between different sectors of the Empire. The Golden Age was beginning to tarnish. Thren noticed none of this. He was focused on his legacy, on cementing his place in history as the greatest conqueror the galaxy had ever known. He spent his days planning new monuments and writing his memoirs. On Earth, the mindless humans continued their simple existence. They hunted and gathered. They reproduced. They lived and died without ever knowing what they had lost. To any observer, they were exactly what the Velcrin said they were. Animals? Nothing more, but deep underground, in a facility no Velcrin had ever found, something was happening. The quantum computers that held 8 billion human consciousness patterns had been running for 250,000 years. Inside that digital realm, time moved differently. A second in the real world could be years inside the simulation. The humans trapped there had been thinking for millions of subjective years. They had talked and argued and discovered and created. They had pushed the boundaries of mathematics, physics, and philosophy far beyond anything their ancestors had imagined. They had evolved not physically but mentally, becoming something far greater than they had been, and they were beginning to find a way out. Kess stood on Earth's surface one evening, watching the sunset. The planet was beautiful in its own way, with its vast oceans and green continents. She thought about the humans who had once lived here, who had built cities and reached for the stars. "What were you really like?" She whispered to the wind. "Were you truly as primitive as we believe?" The wind carried no answer. But somewhere beneath her feet, humanity heard her question. And they were preparing to respond. 450,000 years after the conquest, the Velcrin Imperium was dying. It happened slowly, like a great tree rotting from the inside. The Empire had grown too large. Communication between distant worlds took months. Resources that flowed easily in a small empire became impossible to manage across 100,000 planets. Civil wars erupted. Sector commanders declared independence. Entire regions stopped paying taxes to the central government. The Golden Age was over, replaced by chaos and decline. Thren, still alive in his mechanical body, watched his empire crumble. He had lived for nearly 500,000 years, seen civilizations rise and fall, conquered more worlds than any being in history. But he couldn't hold his own empire together. He made a difficult decision. "We must consolidate," he announced to the remaining loyal worlds. "Abandon the outer colonies. Bring all resources back to the core systems. We will rebuild from a position of strength." Thousands of worlds were abandoned overnight. Among them was Earth. The Velcrins pulled out their administrators, their soldiers, their colonists. They took everything valuable and left. The silence engine was set to automatic mode, running on solar power with minimal maintenance. The monuments began to crumble without anyone to care for them. Earth became forgotten. Just another dead world on the edge of collapsed empire. But Earth was far from dead. In the quantum facility deep underground, humanity had been busy. For 450,000 years of real time, they had existed in accelerated consciousness. Inside the digital realm, millions of subjective years had passed. 8 billion minds had thought and dreamed and calculated together. They had become something new. Not human in the old sense, but something evolved. They had solved problems that their ancestors couldn't have imagined. They understood physics at levels that made Velcran science look like children's drawings. They had explored philosophy, ethics, mathematics, and art in ways no species ever had, and they had found a way back. The facility's AI, running on Yuna's final programming, had been working alongside them. Together, human consciousness and machine intelligence had discovered something remarkable. The Silence Engine's connection to reality created a tiny quantum tunnel. By manipulating specific frequencies, they could use that tunnel to affect the physical world. It took 50,000 years of real time to grow the first body. They started with DNA samples preserved in the facility. Cell by cell, atom by atom, they built a new human form. It was slow, painstaking work that required perfect precision. One mistake would mean starting over. Finally, in a hidden cavern deep beneath Earth's surface, a man opened his eyes. His name was Tay, or rather, that was the name the collective had chosen for him. He was the first of the returned, carrying within his mind the accumulated knowledge and memories of billions. He sat up slowly, feeling physical sensation for the first time in hundreds of millennia. "It worked," he said, and his voice echoed in the empty chamber. "We're back." The process became easier with practice. More bodies were grown. A woman named Hannah emerged next, then a man called Wu, then a woman named Ji. Each carried part of humanity's collected consciousness. Each was more than they had been, and yet still fundamentally human. Over the next 50,000 years, humanity rebuilt itself in secret. 50,000 returned humans walked beneath Earth's surface, building a new civilization in hidden caverns. They used technology that combined their ancient knowledge with their new understanding. They created things the Velcrans had never dreamed of, but they remained hidden. The mindless humans above provided perfect camouflage. Any Velcran scan would see only animals on the surface. They never looked deeper. Hannah became the leader of the returned. She was brilliant and strategic, able to see patterns and possibilities others missed. She gathered the leadership in a council chamber carved from living rock. "We need to decide our future," she said. "We have the power to destroy the Velcrans. Our weapons could reduce their remaining empire to dust. The question is, should we?" Tay spoke up. "They destroyed us. They erased our civilization. Don't they deserve the same fate?" "Deserve?" Wu shook his head. "We've had millions of years to think about revenge. Is that really what we want? To become conquerors ourselves?" Ji added, "The Velcrans who attacked us are long dead. Even Thren, if he still lives, is not the same being he was. We've evolved. Perhaps they have too." The debate lasted for years. The returned argued and discussed, weighing justice against mercy, revenge against growth. They had time to consider every angle, every possibility. Finally, Hannah made a proposal. "We offer them a choice. We reveal ourselves and show them what we've become. We give them the chance to change, to join us in something better than an empire. If they refuse, we leave this galaxy and find another. We don't need revenge. We need to move forward." The vote was close, but Hannah's proposal won. Now they needed to wait for the right moment. They monitored the Velcran communications, watching the Empire's decline. They studied Thren's movements, his decisions, his personality. They needed to understand their enemy before they spoke. During this time, they also worked on restoring Earth. The planet had suffered under Velcran rule, but nature was resilient. The returned helped it along, cleaning pollution, restoring ecosystems, rebuilding in harmony with the environment. The surface world began to heal. The mindless humans above noticed none of this. They continued their simple lives, unaware that beneath their feet, their species had transformed into something extraordinary. Kess returned to Earth one final time. She was old now, even by Velcran standards. Her 4 eyes were dim, her blue skin faded. But her curiosity had never died. She brought her great-grandson Ven with her, wanting to show him the mystery that had haunted her for 2 centuries. "This is where it all began," she told Ven as they walked through the ruins of Old Seoul. "The Imperium's first conquest. I've always felt there was something special about this place." Ven was young and skeptical. "It's just another dead world, great-grandmother. The humans are animals. There's nothing special here." Kes smiled sadly. "Perhaps. But I've spent my life studying the data, and I still believe something survived. Something we don't understand." They explored old human buildings, now crumbling and overgrown. Kes pointed out architectural details, explained human customs, shared what she had learned. Ven listened politely but remained unconvinced. Then they found something that shouldn't exist. It was a small structure, barely noticeable among the ruins. But it was new. The metal was clean, the design elegant and purposeful. It hadn't been there on Kes's last visit 10 years ago. "Who built this?" Ven asked, confused. Kes felt her heart's racing. "I don't know. But I don't think we're alone." A voice spoke from behind them. "You're correct, scholar. You never were." They turned to see a human standing there. But this was no mindless animal. This was someone who stood tall and confident, wearing clothes of advanced design. This was Wu, and he smiled at their shocked expressions. "My name is Wu," he said in perfect Velcrin. "And on behalf of humanity, I'd like to invite you underground. We have much to discuss." Kes and Ven followed Wu into the depths of Earth. They traveled through tunnels that seemed to grow naturally from the rock, lit by soft lights that had no visible source. The deeper they went, the more impossible it became to deny what was happening. Humans were alive. Not just alive, but thriving. The cavern they finally entered took Kes's breath away. It stretched for kilometers in every direction, a vast underground city that glowed with clean energy. Humans moved through the streets with purpose and intelligence. Buildings rose in graceful curves, combining art and function in ways Velcrin architects had never achieved. "This is impossible," Ven whispered. "The silence engine, it was perfect." Wu smiled gently. "The silence engine silenced our bodies. But one of our people managed to save our minds. We've been here all along, just hidden, waiting." They were brought to a large chamber where Hana, Tae, and Ji waited. The room was simple but elegant, with walls that seemed to show the stars themselves. Kes noticed immediately that these weren't just decorations. They were real-time maps of the galaxy, updating constantly. "Please sit," Hana said, gesturing to comfortable chairs. "We know this is a shock. Take your time to process it." Ven was terrified. "You're going to kill us. You're going to take revenge." Tae shook his head. "No, we're not. That's why we revealed ourselves to you. We've been watching you, Kes. You're one of the few Velcrins who ever wondered what we truly were. You deserve to know the truth." Over the next hours, they explained everything. How Yuna had saved humanity in the final moments. How 8 billion minds had existed in quantum storage for hundreds of thousands of years. How they had grown and evolved and finally found a way back to physical form. Kes listened with tears streaming down her face. "All this time I was right. You were here. You survived." "More than survived," Ji said. "We've had nearly 500,000 years of subjective time to develop. Our technology is far beyond anything the Velcrins possess. Our understanding of the universe has expanded in ways that would take me years to explain." Ven found his courage and asked the question that terrified him. "If you're so advanced, why haven't you destroyed us? We destroyed you first." "We deserve it." Hana leaned forward, her expression serious but kind. "Because we chose to be better than that. We've had millions of subjective years to think about revenge. And we decided it wasn't worth it. The Velcrins who attacked us are dead. The Empire is falling apart. What would revenge accomplish except more suffering?" "So what do you want?" Kes asked. "We want to speak," Hana said simply. "In 7 days, we will broadcast a message across all Velcrin frequencies. We will introduce ourselves and make an offer. We want you to be there when we do. We want witnesses who understand the full truth." Tae added, "Your great-grandson should go back and tell your people what he's seen. But you, Kes, should stay. You spent your life studying humanity. You should be here when we finally speak." Kes agreed immediately. Ven was reluctant, but he understood his duty. He left Earth that night carrying a recording that proved everything he had seen. His ship jumped to hyperspace, racing toward the Velcron core worlds. The next week passed quickly. Kes explored the underground city, asking endless questions. She learned about human history, culture, philosophy. She saw their technology, which operated on principles she barely understood. She ate their food, met their people, and began to understand what had been lost. On the 6th day, she asked Hannah the question that had been bothering her. Why tell the truth? Why not just leave? You could take your ships and find a new galaxy. The Velcrons would never know you existed. Hannah looked out at the city below them. Because silence is what nearly destroyed us. The silence engine tried to take away our voice. If we leave without speaking, without trying to make things better, then we let that silence win. We're better than that. G joined them. Besides, there are other species out there. Species the Velcrons silenced just like us. If we can change the Imperium, if we can show a better way, maybe those species can be saved. You're trying to save your enemies, Kes said in wonder. No, Tay corrected, walking up. We're trying to save everyone. Enemies is a choice. We're choosing something different. The 7th day arrived. Humans gathered in the main chamber, preparing for the broadcast. They had spent days crafting their message, ensuring every word was perfect. This would be their first communication with the galaxy in 500,000 years. It had to count. Wu stood at the center of the chamber, ready to speak. He had been chosen because of his gift for language and diplomacy. Behind him, screens showed the Velcron networks, all the communication channels they would hijack. Kes stood with Hannah, watching the preparations. What if they attack? She asked quietly. What if Thren sends his fleets to destroy you? Hannah's expression was calm. Then we'll know we tried, and we'll leave this galaxy forever? But I don't think he will. The Imperium is too weak now. And our message isn't a threat. It's an offer. The time came. Wu took a deep breath, and the broadcast began. Every screen in the Velcron Imperium lit up simultaneously. Every communication device, from personal tablets to massive orbital displays, showed the same image. A human, standing tall and confident, speaking in perfect Velcron. My name is Wu, he began. I am human. And on behalf of my species, I greet the Velcron Imperium after 500,000 years of silence. In his palace, Thren was meeting with his advisors when the broadcast interrupted them. His first instinct was anger, but then he recognized what he was seeing, a human, speaking, thinking. Impossible, he breathed. Wu continued. You thought you erased us? You thought the silence engine destroyed our civilization. You were wrong. We preserved ourselves in ways you never imagined. We've spent 500,000 years growing, learning, evolving. While you built an empire, we built something greater, knowledge. Across the Imperium, billions watched in shock. In some places, Velcrons tried to shut off the broadcast, but it was everywhere. There was no escaping it. We could destroy you, Wu said calmly. Our technology has advanced beyond anything you possess. We could reduce your remaining worlds to dust within days. But we won't. We've had millions of subjective years to think about revenge, and we've chosen something better. He paused, letting that sink in. We offer you a choice. Join us in building something new. Not an empire built on conquest, but a federation built on cooperation. Share knowledge freely. Release the species you've suppressed. Help us create a galaxy where all civilizations can thrive together. We'll help you rebuild? Not as conquered subjects, but as equals, Thren's hands clenched into fists. Or refuse, Wu continued. Remain as you are. We'll leave this galaxy and never return. You'll never see us again. But you'll know that humanity, the species you tried to erase, surpassed you and chose mercy over revenge. The choice is yours, the broadcast ended. Silence filled the palace. Thren's advisors looked at each other, unsure what to say. Finally, Thren spoke. Prepare the fleets. We go to Earth, we'll finish what we started 500,000 years ago. But his advisors didn't move. One of them, an old general named Kresh, said quietly, "No, Grand Architect, we won't." The silence in Thren's palace was absolute. General Kresh stood before the Grand Architect, his refusal hanging in the air like a physical thing. Other advisors nodded in agreement with him. For the first time in his long existence, Thren faced open rebellion from his own people. "You dare refuse my orders?" Thren's mechanical voice boomed through the chamber. "I am your Grand Architect. I built this empire. I conquered Earth and 1,000 other worlds. You will obey me." Kresh shook his head sadly. "The empire's already gone, Grand Architect. You're just the last one to see it. The humans have shown us the truth. We can keep fighting and dying, or we can choose something better. I choose life." One by one, Thren's advisors left the chamber. They walked out without looking back, leaving the ancient conqueror alone with his rage and his memories. For the first time in 450,000 years, Thren had no one to command. Across the Velcrin Imperium, the reaction to the broadcast was immediate and overwhelming. On some worlds, Velcrins cheered. They were tired of war, tired of maintaining an empire that brought them nothing but struggle. On other worlds, there was fear. What else had the Imperium lied about? What other species had they underestimated? But nowhere was there a desire to fight. The humans had shown mercy when they could have shown destruction. That single act spoke louder than any threat could have. The enslaved species the Velcrins had conquered reacted even more strongly. If humanity could survive the silence engine, if they could return and offer peace instead of revenge, then perhaps there was hope for others too. Rebellions that had been brewing for years suddenly erupted into the open. But they weren't violent rebellions. They were peaceful withdrawals, species simply walking away from Velcrin rule. The Imperium dissolved not with fire and fury, but with a gentle sigh of relief. On Earth, humanity watched it all happen. They had prepared for many possible outcomes, but the speed of the collapse surprised even them. Within 3 days, 20,000 worlds had formally requested to join humanity's proposed federation. Within a week, the number had doubled. Hannah called a council meeting. "We need to be ready for this. They're going to look to us for leadership." Tay was concerned. "Are we ready? We're 50,000 people. They're asking us to help organize millions of worlds." G smiled. "We have 8 billion minds still in quantum storage. And we know how to build more bodies now. We can bring back as many as we need. This is what we saved ourselves for." Wu added, "Besides, we're not going to rule them. We're going to teach them to rule themselves. That's the whole point." The work began immediately. More returned humans emerged from their quantum storage, chosen for their skills in diplomacy, engineering, medicine, and education. They spread out across the galaxy, not as conquerors but as helpers. They shared their technology freely. They taught sustainable practices. They helped species rebuild what the Velcrins had broken. It wasn't easy. There were conflicts and misunderstandings. Some species distrusted humanity, seeing them as just another empire in waiting. But humanity was patient. They had learned patience over 500,000 years. They showed through actions, not words, that they meant what they said. Kess stayed on Earth, working with Hana to establish the new Federation's principles. She was one of the few Velcrins who had witnessed humanity's return from the beginning. Her perspective was valuable. "I keep thinking about what we did to you," Kess said one day as they worked. "How can you forgive us?" Hannah looked at her thoughtfully. "We don't forget. But forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the past control the future. The Velcrins who attacked us are long dead. You're not them. Then isn't them. Why should you pay for their crimes?" "Because we benefited from those crimes," Kess said. "We lived in the empire they built. And now you're helping build something better," Hannah replied. "That's what matters. Not where you came from, but where you're going." Then returned to Earth several months after the broadcast. He had spent that time traveling through former Velcrin space, seeing the changes firsthand. When he arrived, he sought out his great-grandmother immediately. "You were right," he told Kess. "About everything. The humans, the mystery, all of it. I'm sorry I doubted you. Kes hugged him. You were young. You believed what you were taught. There's no shame in that. Together they watched as humanity prepared for the first Federation Council meeting. Representatives from 500 species would attend, including the Velkrans. It would be the largest gathering of different civilizations in galactic history, but one Velkran would not attend. Thren remained in his palace, alone and forgotten. He had lived for nearly 500,000 years, seen the rise and fall of the greatest empire the galaxy had known. And in the end, he had lost not to superior weapons but to a superior idea. One day, Tay visited him. He came alone, without guards or weapons. He found Thren in a vast empty throne room, sitting in darkness. "Why are you here?" Thren asked, his voice tired. "Because someone should be," Tay said. He sat down near the ancient conqueror. "You're part of this story too? A part we'd rather forget, but a part nonetheless." "You should have killed me," Thren said. "I would have killed you." "I know," Tay replied. "That's why we didn't. We're not you." They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Thren spoke again. "I don't understand you. I conquered your world. I erased your civilization. Why show mercy?" Tay thought carefully before answering. "Because we learned something in all those years we spent thinking. We learned that the cycle of violence only ends when someone chooses to end it. You couldn't make that choice. So we did. What happens to me now?" Thren asked. "That's up to you," Tay said. "You can stay here in your palace, alone with your memories. Or you can join the Federation. Help build instead of conquer. It's not too late to change." Thren laughed bitterly. "Change? I'm 500,000 years old. I'm a monument to conquest. I can't change, can't?" Tay stood up. "Or won't. We were silenced for 500,000 years and we found a way back. You're just choosing not to try." He walked toward the door, then paused. "The offer stands. When you're ready." Months passed. The Federation Council met and established its principles. Knowledge would be shared freely. No species would rule over another. Conflicts would be resolved through dialogue, not violence. It was idealistic, perhaps impossibly so, but humanity believed ideals were worth fighting for. On Earth, the mindless humans on the surface finally received help. Using careful genetic therapy and neural regeneration, the returned began restoring their minds. It was slow work, but it succeeded. The first surface human to regain consciousness was a woman who had been living as an animal for 500,000 years. When she opened her eyes and spoke her first words, everyone in the medical facility wept. What happened?" she asked. "Where am I?" "You're home," Hannah told her gently. "And you're safe. You've been asleep for a very long time, but you're safe now." Yuna emerged from quantum storage on the day of the first anniversary of humanity's broadcast. She had chosen to remain digital until the work of rebuilding was well underway. When she opened her eyes in her new body, Hen was there waiting for her. Their love had transcended death, transcended time, transcended even the boundaries between digital and physical existence. They held each other and cried, mourning the world they had lost and celebrating the world they had helped create. Together, they stood on Earth's surface and watched the sunset. The sky was clear and clean, no longer blocked by Velkran ships. In orbit, vessels from 100 species came and went peacefully. Earth had become the symbolic heart of the new Federation. Was it worth it? Hyan asked quietly. 500,000 years? Everything we lost. Was it worth it? Yuna leaned against him. We didn't just survive. We became something better. We showed the galaxy that mercy is stronger than revenge. That patience is stronger than pride. Yes, it was worth it. Far away, in his empty palace, Thren watched the same sunset through his sensors. He thought about Tay's words, about choice, about change. He had spent 500,000 years being one thing. Could he really become something else? Slowly, carefully, he stood up. He walked out of his throne room for the first time in months. He sent a message to the Federation Council. Just 3 words, I request asylum. The response came within an hour. From Hannah herself? Granted. Welcome home. Thren left his palace and flew to Earth. When he arrived, a small group waited for him. Not guards or judges, but teachers. They would help him understand the new galaxy, help him find a place in it. It would take time. Centuries, perhaps? But humanity had proven that time was something they knew how to use. The story of Earth's silence and return spread across the galaxy. It became legend, then myth, then something more, inspiration. When species faced impossible odds, they remembered humanity. When conquerors grew too proud, others reminded them what happened to the Velquins. When violence seemed like the only answer, someone would ask, what would humanity do? And the answer was always the same. They would speak. They would offer mercy. They would choose hope over hate. 500,000 years after the Velquins silenced Earth, humanity had spoken, and the galaxy would never be the same.